Plainly speaking, the attackers used GitHub Actions to create a push and publish the poisoned packages. They basically published the poisoned packages with provenance verified and SLSA attestation present so that everything looks fine. Now, once the developers imported the packages using the require, at that exact moment, the packages deployed a 4-stage botnet loader that deployed at the end the Miasma framework, which, of course, beacons to the attacker's C2 server. Now, for background, AsyncAPI is a widely used open source toolkit that helps developers document and build APIs that handle real-time event streams. You see, its NPM packages are downloaded millions of times a week by developers around the world. Now, in July 14, someone compromised the process that publishes these packages to NPM. According to this research, 5 NPM packages were poisoned with hidden malware. It was basically hidden inside legitimate utility files, so it wouldn't trigger install time security checks. The malware only activates when the developer's code actually uses the package, making it harder to detect during normal security scanning. Once triggered, the malware quietly downloads a much larger program from a decentralized file network called the IPFS, which means there is no central server to take down here. It decrypts and launches it and establishes a persistent remote access connection back to the attacker's server. Now here the framework it deploys called the Miasma. It can execute shell commands, steal files, and update itself, while the attacker can also push updates through the Ethereum smart contracts as fallback channels if the main server goes down. Now, the most interesting part is this piece here. You see, the value safe mode equals to true. And according to this research, the actual persist equals to false. That appears in the malware, right? This basically means that the malware does not attempt to persist in the system. However, during the execution or during runtime, it was determined that these values have no effect during the execution, during runtime. That basically could be attributed to the malware developers trying to confuse the analysts, right? It could also be a development artifact that was never cleaned up. Plainly speaking, the attackers used GitHub Actions to create a push and publish the poisoned packages. They basically published the poisoned packages with provenance verified and SLSA attestation present so that everything looks fine. Now, once the developers imported the packages using the require, at that exact moment, the packages deployed a 4-stage botnet loader that deployed at the end the Miasma framework, which, of course, beacons to the attacker's C2 server. If you look at the infected packages, they have basically names that deceive analysts, such as maybe we have validator, and we have the utilities.js, and there is the error handling. These are the names of the infected packages. You see here what happens. The code or the infected code is hidden inside a regular JavaScript file that looks like it belongs to the package, the validator, the utility, the error handler. So when your code loads that file to use its legitimate functionality, the hidden code here runs silently in the background. Okay. Also, if you look at the utilities, you see that's basically the code, page 64. The trick here that makes it nearly invisible, is that after launching the background process, the infected file immediately returns the control to the real package code. In this case, for example, it's the utility, right? So the application here continues working normally with no crash. Also, if you look, if you go scroll above here, you can see that the malicious code, if you look at the commits here and the history and how many files changed, we see that the malicious code is also present in the GitHub commit diff, not just the NPM tarball, which confirms that the source was poisoned before publish. You see, the problem here is that tools like NPM audit and registry scanners specifically look for pre-install and post-install scripts. Now here, moving the trigger into regular module, validator, error handler, this basically bypasses this detection surface entirely. Now, if you look at the deobfuscated version of the malicious code that was injected into these packages, you see once it is loaded, here via the module import, okay, it basically spawns node-e, which basically retrieves the second stage downloader, the encrypted downloader, which later retrieves the Miasma botnet. But the thing here is, after spawning the node-e, it basically assigns the detached equal to true, which means it detached from the parent process and returns the control to the package workflow. So after the payload is retrieved, the package imported, or the model that's imported, whether it is validator or error handling or the utility, continues working normally here. If you're part of a security team, you can basically use ANY.RUN to safely detonate malware samples linked to a threat actor. You can also study their intelligence tactics. All you have to do is just to click on sign in from here, and then you will see the sign in form. Now, if you don't have an account, all you have to do is just to click on sign up. And from here, you fill in your name, your business email, your password, and your job role, whether it's SOC analyst or threat research, and then you can sign up. Now, after you sign up, okay, on the left, you can basically click on new analysis, upload the sample you want to analyze. SOC teams can detonate these packages in a live environment. So what I did, basically, I copied the utility package here, and I detonated the package entirely in ANY.RUN's sandbox. Of course, what I did first, I did install Node.js on the sandbox machine, and then basically I executed the package, the JavaScript package here. Okay, so what I wanted to monitor here, I wanted to monitor what happens during stage 2, how the payload is basically retrieved after the package is executed or is imported during the CI pipeline. So if I look at the process tree on the right, you see, after I executed the package using the command line, then using Node.js, the module basically node-e, if you look at this process ID, 8288, and then click on more info, you see there's a warning here, danger, connecting to interplanetary file system domain. And if you look at the command here, you see it is node-e, the exact same pattern we noticed earlier during stage 2 of this attack. Okay, so with node-e, it basically starts the stage 2, which is retrieving the payload from the IPFS. That is the most operationally clever aspect of this attack. Okay, now if we basically have a look at the process ID, it is 8288, and we look at the connections tab, and maybe then filter by the process ID, so 8288, and take a look at this. Now, the main process, the parent process node, okay, connects to this IP address, and the main name is IPFS.io. We copy this, and that's the site where from which the payload is retrieved. Now, this basically, the IPFS is the interplanetary file system, which is a decentralized peer-to-peer network where content is addressed by its cryptographic hash, rather than just maybe a server location, right? So there is no centralized, there's no central server here to seize, and we won't see any domain to take down. The payload sits at the permanent content addressed URL until every node seeding it is individually purged. We look back at the process tree here on the right. After node-e retrieve the second stage payload, we see again another process ID 3168. If you look at this and click on more info, we see now there is a new JavaScript file called sync.js. That's the payload that was fetched from the IPFS, right? It was fetched basically via hard-coded CID. An example of a hard-coded CID is this, as you can see here. So a pattern URL would look like this: ipfs.io/ipfs/the CID. Every time there is a new CID generated for every package or every payload retrieved. So when we look back here, the sync.js was basically retrieved this way: a connection to the IPFS, okay, with a hard-coded CID such as this one. Okay. Now then, after sync.js is retrieved, what happens? It basically writes to a platform-specific fake Node.js directory, such as maybe these. These are example fake Node.js directories, right? That the payload writes to. And then it executes, if we look back at the process tree, it executes as another detached process. Take a look here. After the payload is retrieved, it executes now as another detached process. 8024, here it adds itself to, let's have a look. So it uses regedit to modify or delete registry entries. So it adds itself to the auto run, okay, to start at every system boot. Okay. Now this in turn will retrieve the encrypted loader, which will later deploy the Miasma framework or the Botnet framework. This pattern holds true for all of these poison packages. If you also analyze maybe error handling with ANY.RUN, I followed the same thought process. I installed Node.js on the sandbox machine, and then I normally executed the package using Node. So it happens, we see a process, the process ID on the right, 6104. It spawns node-e to retrieve the second stage payload. Okay, and if you look at the processes that follow this process, we see also there is the process 2880, the process ID node executes the sync.js, which is the second stage payload here that retrieves the encrypted botnet loader. Now, if you take a look at the, or if we copy the process ID here, 6104 node-e, and we paste it in the connections tab, again, it connects to IPFS.io. That's the pattern across all these poison packages. They connect to an IPFS site to retrieve the encrypted loader and thus the Miasma framework. Now, here is the thing, with a conventional payload server, law enforcement or a hosting provider can basically shut down the server and then the attack chain breaks. However, with IPFS, the story is entirely different. With IPFS, the content is basically replicated across nodes worldwide. So removing the payload requires coordinating every node pinning it, which is, I believe, a much harder operation to achieve. And the attacker basically can use the same CID link indefinitely, knowing that they do not need to own an infrastructure to retrieve the payload. And reaching the payload requires coordinating with every node in the IPFS network, which makes it nearly impossible to retrieve or to shut down the node, which basically turns the NPM package to maybe just a permanent pointer to an off-registry payload that the attacker controls. Back to ANY.RUN here, if you wanted to examine the contents of the sync.js, okay, we can basically navigate through the sandbox file system here. So according to the process tree, it is located in update local Node.js. So we navigate there, and that's the second stage loader. Take a look at its contents. You see it uses a lot of cryptographic algorithms. Among them is the use of the ROT algorithm, okay, and the use of crypto modules. So it is obfuscated from the start till the end. If you want to deobfuscate this, how it will look like. Now, if you have a look at these IOCs, and that's according to the Socket research, we see we have the main C2 server to which the Miasma beacons every 30 seconds. That's the IP address, and it is basically on port 8080. This is for signed and encrypted tasking, and that's also the upload server. Now, the thing is, there is fallback to plain text if the cipher is absent. And note that it uses HTTP, not HTTPS. Okay. Next, we have, as you can see, let's have a look, the C2 proxy management, the IPFS API, and we explained this. This hosts the stage 2 payloads and encrypted data objects at the IPFS API and the IPFS gateway. These basically the payload updates fetched by the CID. Okay, the operator can publish a new payload without touching the NPM. Next, we have the Noster relays. That's the Noster relays indicators. As you can see, this is used for address updates, signed payload update records, also peer discovery. And lastly, we have the Ethereum RPC addresses and the Ethereum contract. These basically are used for service address plus update records from smart contract. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is to use ANY.RUN's threat intelligence to build a query using these indicators. When we build a query using these indicators, we'll be able to alert whenever these poison packages enter the pipeline, or at least execute in the developer pipeline. So let's go back. I look at first, we can use a query to that use a combination of these, not single one of them. So we're gonna first have a look at this IP address. Build a query first here. We're gonna say IP or destination IP. It's going to be this IP address. Let's have a look. Gonna copy this. Gonna remove the convert from defined form into the original form. Okay, that's not enough. We're going to also need the IPFS artifact here. So any connection to an IPFS file sharing and also accompanied by connection to this IP address, because at the end, the Miasma framework connects to this IP address for beaconing. So here we add and domain name includes the IPFS.io. So that's an example query here. We can search if there are any analysis sessions or artifacts where these two indicators are spotted. Okay. And based on that, we can read the indicators and use the TI feed to send them automatically to the SIEM solutions. So you have 4 analysis sessions. That's understandable because the attack is still fresh. Okay. Now, on the indicators, we have this domain. By itself alone, it is not an indicator because it's file sharing. We want to follow the execution chain by pinning the CIDs. Also, we have 2 IP addresses. However, you can basically use this query and monitor in real time. You can use the TI feeds here to monitor in real time and send indicators to your SIEM solutions. And let's go back and have a look at other IOCs. There is also the connection to the Ethereum RPCs. These also can be used as destination domains in your TI query. Now to the action list. What needs to be done? First, we're going to have to remove these poisoned packages from the manifests, the cache, and the log file. What does it mean? We're going to have to locate package JSON and package log JSON here. We're going to have to make sure that they are not pinned to these poisoned packages. Right? These are the poisoned packages. Make sure your package, the manifests and the cache are not pinned to these poisoned packages. Therefore, we effectively remove them. Next, we're going to need to search the build logs, CI scripts, test runners, and application code for imports of the infected modules. Basically, if you can't confirm non-execution, you're going to have to treat every machine that had the packages as potentially compromised. The next thing you want to do is we go back to ANY.RUN here and check the sync.js. We agreed that that was the second stage payload, right? Now, if we monitor this location or build a query in the TI feed that monitors this exact location for any occurrences of sync.js, we can basically spot the attack if it happens. Right? Next, you're going to have to find and remove persistence mechanisms per platform. In Windows, you should check the registry key current version, run once, or run for the values that include the sync.js or even the Miasma monitor service. So in the research page here, you can see the regular or the usual values we could find or we could search for is Miasma monitor.service. Now that's in Linux, but it also stands true in Windows. You check for Miasma-monitor string in the registry auto start keys. Okay, in Windows, Linux, and also in Mac OS, check for this string. At the end, I have added all of these. At the end, I have compiled all of this research in one cheat sheet. You can find it in the video description. And there you could also find the to-do list, what to do to hunt for this attack or to check for indicators of compromise. Also, it contains all the indicators of compromise, the vulnerable versions, and the mapping to the MITRE entity and CK. So that was it for today. See you later.